The wind hits first, a sharp -30 biting across Atsa's face as he steps out into the dark. He knows the rules of nights like this. One wrong layer, one gap in the wall, and every bit of heat will vanish before midnight. But there's something else pressing on him tonight, a memory. Half-formed, half-forgotten. His ancestors had a way to trap warmth even when the world outside felt like a giant block of ice. He just isn't sure he remembers it all, not yet. So he moves fast, breath freezing on his lips, hands already numb, because before this night is over, he'll need 5 tricks, 5 ancient choices, and every one of them could mean the difference between warmth and frost. Atsa taps the ground with the back of his knuckles. Even through the hide gloves, he can feel it. The kind of frozen earth that steals warmth faster than the wind ever could. Out here on a -30 night, lying straight on the ground is like handing over 60% of your body heat. No one survives that, not for long. But his ancestors didn't fight the earth. They worked with it. They understood that cold soil could still guard a man if he shaped it right. So Atsa drops to one knee and starts digging. Fast, shallow, controlled. A bowl-shaped depression just deep enough to slip into, but not so deep that cold air can pool inside it. The rim of the pit rises around him like a natural windbreak, low but solid, cutting off the icy drafts that skim the ground. He smooths the edges with his palm. It doesn't look like much. It never does. But this is where the microclimate begins. A pocket of calmer air, a space where his own heat can gather instead of fleeing into the dirt. The difference is immediate. The ground stops pulling warmth from his bones. The wind stops clawing at his back. And for the first time tonight, the warmth begins to collect instead of disappear. But Atsa doesn't let himself relax, not even for a second. A warm back doesn't mean a warm night. Not when the needle wind is still coming. Not when the sky is already turning that hard, flat color that means colder hours are on the way. He stands up, breath fogging in the air, heat rising behind him from the dugout hollow. It's a start, but he knows the truth. A start won't keep him alive until sunrise. The wind shifts again, sharper now, colder. It comes low to the ground, carrying that needle-edge warning that the worst hours of the night are moving in. Atsa feels it sweep across his shoulders as he stands over the shallow pit he just carved. The first layer is done, but a warm back won't matter if the shelter above him bleeds heat like a cracked pot. Tall frames lose warmth fast. Everyone in these lands learns that young. The higher the walls, the more the wind grabs them, pulling warm air right out through the gaps. It is the oldest thief on the plains, the kind you never see, only feel. So Atsa reaches for the willow poles, thin, flexible, reliable. He bends the first one until the wood strains but doesn't break. That curve is everything, because a curved frame doesn't fight the wind. It redirects it. Lets the gusts slide off instead of slamming straight through. One arch, then another, and another. Each one angled low, forming a half-dome shape that hugs the ground. The lower the dome, the less surface the wind can latch onto. It's basic physics. Smaller exposure, lower drag, more warmth left inside where a man needs it most. He ties the joints tight with rawhide. His fingers are stiff now, slow to obey. The cold is numbing them one knuckle at a time, and the wind is picking up again, knocking the loose ends of the frame as if trying to test him, trying to find a weak spot. But the dome begins to take shape. A low, rounded skeleton crouched over the pit, waiting for its skin. Wind slides away. The frame holds firm. Heat stays trapped. For a moment, Atsa lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. But as he tightens the final knot, he feels the sting spreading across his fingertips. Another warning. If the covering isn't perfect, if even one seam opens under the needle wind, everything he's built so far will fall apart. He glances up at the sky. It's darkening fast. He doesn't have time. And the night isn't waiting. Snow begins to fall harder now. Not the soft kind. This is the sharp, needle-cut snow that whispers trouble long before the storm truly arrives. It stings across Atsa's cheeks as he works settling on the half-finished dome like a warning. The ground pit is ready, the curved frame is holding, but the wind is finding every open seam, slipping through like a thief trying every door. In weather like this, cold air doesn't just chill you, it siphons heat through convection, pulling warm air out from the smallest gaps and replacing it with freezing drafts. If the walls breathe too much, the shelter dies before the man inside does. That's why his ancestors never relied on a single layer. They built warmth the same way they built trust, in layers. Atsa grabs the first bundle of dried reeds, grass mats, light, flexible, surprisingly effective. He lays them against the curved frame from the inside, weaving them together to form a rough skin. This layer holds air, tiny pockets trapped between the stems, nature's insulation. Then he reaches for the heavier hides, thick caribou, stiffened at the edges from old smoke. He stretches each one across the outside of the dome, pulling them tight until they drum beneath his palms. The two materials could not be more different, but together they form something stronger. A buffer pocket, a small dead space between the mat and the hide, and inside that space, warm air gathers and stays put. It is the same principle modern winter coats use: 2 layers, 1 air gap, maximum heat retention. A gust hits the structure, hard, but the snow stops, the wind stalls, and the warmth stays. For the first time since the sun went down, Atsa feels the shelter resisting the cold instead of surrendering to it. His breath hangs in the air, no longer ripped away by drafts. The hides ripple but don't break. The mats flex but hold their ground. Still, his hands shake, not from the cold alone, but from the thought crawling through the back of his mind. This shelter is stronger, warmer, closer, but the fire won't last forever. And when it dies, will this be enough? He tightens one more knot, pulls the hide edge firm, and listens to the wind circling the dome like a predator looking for a weakness. He knows the night is far from over. A small fire now burns in the center of the shelter, no more than a circle of coals, but enough to test everything he's built. Inside the shelter, the air's finally warmer, not comfortable, not safe, but warmer, enough that Atsa can feel heat gathering around his chest instead of leaking away into the night. But there's a new problem rising above him now. The heat isn't staying low, it's drifting upward, pooling against the curved hide roof, and slipping out through the wrong place. Hot air escapes fast, too fast. A smoke hole in the wrong position can drain 30 to 40% of the warmth before a man even realizes what's happening. His ancestors learned that the hard way. Heat moves, wind moves, and if the two are allowed to meet in the wrong spot, the shelter becomes nothing more than a cold tent with a fire inside. So Atsa crouches under the dome, studying the frame from the inside, watching the smoke, watching the wind. The trick isn't just the hole, it's where the hole talks to the wind. Smoke holes must be aligned with the wind's path, not the rising heat. Let the wind pull the smoke out, but never let it steal the warmth. He adjusts the flap first, a simple hide panel, but one that acts like a valve. He angles it toward the oncoming wind, letting the draft create a pull. The smoke follows that pull, sliding out in a steady stream instead of flooding the shelter. Next, he alters the curve of the roof near the opening. Just a small shift, a hand's width, but enough to change the pressure inside the dome. Instead of flowing straight out, the hottest air circles back downward, sweeping around the inside like a warm current before leaving through the hole. The difference is instant. Smoke goes out, wind stays out, heat returns. The shelter breathes, but on Atsa's terms, not the storm's. For a moment he closes his eyes and listens. The fire snaps calmly. The smoke drifts in a narrow ribbon, and the warmth settles around him like a cloak someone else tucked over his shoulders. His people didn't just outsmart the cold, they controlled the air itself. But as the draft stabilizes and the shelter holds its temperature, a single thought gnaws at him again. The wind isn't done. Not yet. And the cold still has one last weapon: the ground. If he doesn't solve that next, everything he's built could still fail before dawn. The temperature drops again, a hard, unforgiving -30 that freezes Atsa's breath the moment it leaves his lips. Inside the shelter, the wind is finally muted, the smoke is behaving, and the walls are holding heat. But the ground is still stealing from him. Slow, constant, like a hand pressed against his spine, pulling warmth away inch by inch. A man can build the perfect walls and still lose the night if the earth drains him dry. His ancestors knew that better than anyone. That's why the bed was never just a place to sleep. It was the final defense, the last line between a warm body and the cold that wanted it gone. So, Atsa begins the last task with numb hands. He gathers cedar boughs first, laying them in a thick, springy layer. This is the lift, the height, the separation that stops direct conduction. Then comes the dried sedge and grass, a second layer that traps air between every blade, forming a soft insulation pad. Finally, he pulls out the bison robe, heavy, smoky, worn smooth in some spots from years of use. He spreads it over the top, tucking the edges just enough to create a shallow bowl, a cradle of warmth, a heat trap designed to hug the shape of his body and hold every degree he produces. He lowers himself onto it, slowly, carefully, and then it happens. His back warms, the air stills, the heat locks in. For the first time all night, he can feel the shelter working with him instead of against him. The layers beneath him don't just soften the cold, they block it, redirect it, turn his own body into the fire that carries him toward morning. Survival, he realizes, is sometimes just the art of protecting that final breath of warmth, holding on to the last heat the world can't take. He closes his eyes, his hands keep trembling, but the trembling fades, slowly, gradually. Atsa knows now. He will see the sunrise. Dawn finally pushes over the horizon, a thin line of gold cutting through the frozen gray. Atsa opens his eyes to a shelter that has held through the night. The walls are still warm to the touch. The heat bowl still cradles the last of his body heat. Inside, it's a full 25 to 35 degrees warmer than the world outside, enough to mean the difference between waking up and not waking at all. It's funny, he thinks. Today we talk about insulation energy loss heating bills. His people face the same battles just without the wiring and the price tags. And they solved them with earthwood, hide, and air. The old ones didn't fight the cold. They talked to it. Atsa steps out into the quiet morning snow crunching under his feet. And there's one more secret waiting. A shelter that stays warm, even in heavy rain. That comes next.